Hello everyone, in this video or chapter we are going to talk about public goods, public choice and government failure. In the previous video we talked about market failures, and when markets cannot efficiently allocate resources, we prefer government intervene the economy and make the allocation efficient. Now in this chapter we will talk about another case where we need government, which is public goods. And then we will talk about government, where government can fail allocating resources efficiently. So public goods are services provided by the government that everyone can use and no one is excluded. And these goods suffer from the free rider problem. So what does that mean? That means, first of all, when you go to a park, you don't have to pay for it and nobody can be excluded to go to the park. And when you're walking, nobody is also getting less place to walk because it's open to everyone. So for that reason, public goods actually are demand side market failures because people can enjoy the good without paying, making it unprofitable for firms. Another example is outdoor street performance where people gather to watch without paying. Private goods, on the other hand, are sold in the market and only benefit those who pay. So therefore, private goods are excludable. That means if you pay, you are included, but if you don't pay, you are excluded. And they are also rival in consumption. That means you eat a fish taco, for instance, and when you start eating the fish taco, less and less available for others to consume. And this is not the same case for public goods because, for instance, you walk in the nature in the park, that is a public good. Your walk does not prevent others using the same area that you use. And another example is a cup of coffee. A cup of coffee is a private good because if you don't pay for it, you cannot have it. Because of these two characteristics of rivalry and excludability, the firms can make profit out of it. So public goods are provided by government and they are offered for free. So they are non-rival in consumption, they are non-excludable, and this caused the problem of free rider. So for instance, you value a park in your neighborhood and you ask everyone how much they value. They will say they value a park, so they are willing to pay. But when the time comes for paying the cost of building a park, nobody is going to pay because everybody knows that when the park is built, everyone is going to enjoy without paying. So that's the free rider problem. So here you can see a table shows how individuals' willingness to pay for a public good adds up to the collective demand. So this is, let's say, for national defense. National defense is a public good. First of all, you're not hiring your own police force individually, and second, the national defense protects everyone in the country, and you having a national defense does not affect someone else having the same amount of protection as you have. Either you are a tourist or an international, if there is an attack, everyone is protected. For that reason, it's both non-rival in consumption and non-excludable. Therefore, national defense is a great example for a public good. So Garcia's willingness to pay for one quantity of public good is $4 and Johnson's willingness to pay is $5. Collective willingness to pay is $9. And when you have two public goods, Garcia's willingness to pay decreases to 3, Johnson's to 5. Again, the collective willingness to pay is $7. So the demand for a public good is somewhat unusual. Here, Garcia and Johnson are, let's assume they are the only people in the society and their marginal willingness to pay for a public good, national defense, is shown on the table. Notice that schedules in this table are price quantity schedules reflecting demand. To find the demand for a public good, we add the prices at each quantity. So here we add D1 and D2 for Garcia and Johnson. The collective demand curve for a public good is found by summing vertically the individual willingness to pay curves, D1 and D2 for Garcia and Johnson. And as you see on the screen, the supply is upward sloping here and shows the increasing marginal cost of producing public good as you produce more public good. And when we have to stop to produce, the optimal amount is going to be where marginal benefit equals marginal cost. Supply represents marginal cost and demand represents marginal benefit, and they intersect here. Therefore, 3 units of public good is actually equilibrium quantity. So cost and benefit analysis help decide if public goods should be produced and how much. And for example, governments use it when deciding whether to build a new road, comparing cost and benefits like reduced traffic. And here you see cost and benefit analysis for a national highway. And the table compares different highway construction plans and identifies the optimal plan based on the greatest net benefit. For example, when you look at column 6, the net benefit, which is the subtraction of total cost from the total benefit, right? This is total benefit minus total cost. Here it's 0. Here is 200 minus 50 total cost, which is 150 is the benefit. Here we find it by subtracting 140 from 350. Here we find 470 minus 240, and here we find 580 minus 620. By looking at that, we know that the net benefit is negative for project D, so project D is not an option, we know, but we don't know which one we will choose among A, B, and C. And in order to understand which one to choose, we will use the marginal analysis. By comparing the marginal cost, which is the change in total costs, and marginal benefit, the change in total benefit, we can determine which project brings the optimal benefit to the society. The guideline is well known to you from the previous discussions, previous videos we have. Increase in activity, project, or output as long as the marginal benefit, which is column 5, exceeds the marginal cost, which is column 3. And stop the activity at or as close as possible to the point at which marginal benefit equals to the marginal cost. Do not undertake a project for which marginal cost exceeds marginal benefit. In that case, when you compare the marginal cost and benefit, here is 50, 200, 90, 150, 100, and 120. They're not equal, but marginal cost is close as possible to the marginal benefit. Therefore, project C, in this case, plan C, building new 4-lane highways, is the best plan. Plans A and B are too modest. The marginal benefits exceeds the marginal cost, and there is a better option, which is plan C. Plan D's marginal cost, which is 380 billion, exceeds the marginal benefit 110 billion and therefore cannot be justified. It overallocates resources to the project. Quasi-public goods have positive externalities where the government provides them to avoid underproduction. For example, public education benefits society as a whole. It could be provided by the market economy, but government funds it. And the important point here is that the spillover positive benefits of these quasi-public goods, and therefore government intervenes. And government finances public goods by taxing individuals and businesses, takes the money and spends on production of the public good. This is how you are actually building new parks, construct new roads, and so on. And what is public choice theory? Public choice theory studies how government decisions are made, often reveals inefficiencies. For example, a politician supports policies that benefit a small interest group to secure votes, even if it harms the majority. And majority voting can lead to underproduction or overproduction of public goods, depending on how the votes are cast. And here, for example, a neighborhood rejecting a park because of how votes are counted, even though it would benefit everyone. So therefore, inefficient voting outcomes could be possible with majority voting. But don't think that majority voting is bad. It can lead to inefficient outcomes, but majority voting is better than a dictatorship or authoritarian regime. So inefficient no vote is the underproduction of a specific public good, means underallocation of resources. Inefficient yes vote, overproduction of a specific public good, results in overall production of resources. And there are interest groups that can convince you to vote for a project. And another concept here is log rolling, is the trading of votes to secure a desired outcome can either increase or decrease economic efficiency. So let's say we have two projects and you favor for the project A and your neighbor favors for project B. So you are discussing with your neighbor, telling him or her that you're going to vote for the project B if he or she is willing to vote for project A. So this is log rolling. Here you are seeing an example where majority voting can produce inefficient decisions. In the left graph, we find majority voting leads to rejection of a public good. Because Garcia's benefit is higher than the cost, he is the only one voting for the project, not the Johnson or Lee. But if you look at the total benefit is 1,150, which is greater than 900. So the total benefit is higher than the cost. The project should be done, but the majority voting leads to inefficient no vote. And on the right hand side, you see a case where inefficient majority yes vote. So Johnson's and Lee's benefit is higher than the cost, so they are going to vote yes for the project. Therefore, the project is going to be built. And Garcia will say no. But when you look at the total benefit, 800 is less than the total cost, which leads to inefficient allocation of resources. The paradox of voting occurs when the order of votes changes the outcome, even when preferences stay the same. For instance, voting on parks, libraries, and roads can result in different winners depending on the order of voting. So let's see one example. Here, this table shows how voting outcomes can vary even though voter preferences are consistent. And this table illustrates 3 voters in the community who have 3 public goods to vote for. The top part of the table lists the preferences for the 3 voters, and the lower part shows the outcomes of the elections decided through majority voting. And the outcome of the elections appear irrational by the time the 3rd election is held, but this is really just due to the order in which the votes are taken. So it seems like national defense for Garcia is preferred over road, and that is also true for Lee. Lee also prefers national defense over road. Therefore, we have 2 people preferring national defense over road, Garcia and Lee. When you look at road versus weather warning system, Garcia prefers road over weather warning system, and Johnson also prefers road over weather warning system. And when we compare national defense and weather warning system, we have now the conflict, because now this is preferred by Johnson and Lee. As you see, Johnson prefers weather warning system over national defense, and also Lee prefers weather warning system over national defense. So at the end, we come to an ordering of the results. National defense is preferred over road. Road is preferred over weather warning system. But at the end, weather warning system is preferred national defense. So this is an irrational outcome we get at the end. So let's talk about median voter theorem. Median voter model suggests that election outcomes reflect the preferences of the voter in the middle. And that is actually the result of politicians focusing on swing voters to win the election. So here is the example. Let's say for a public project, Garcia thinks about to spend $400 for the public project, and Lee $800, and Johnson $300. So if we compare first Garcia and Lee's propositions, and Garcia is going to vote for 400, Lee is going to vote for 800, and Johnson is going to vote for 400 because it's closer for Johnson. Therefore, 400 is going to be selected. When you compare 400 with $300 project, Garcia is going to vote for this, Lee is going to vote for this, and Johnson is going to vote for this. Why Lee is voting for this? Because 400 is closer to his expenditure, his spending. Therefore, as you see, we get closer to median voter. That's the median voter model. There are other alternative voting mechanisms which you can read from the textbook. And in quadratic voting, voters are allowed to purchase and cast as many votes as desired. And now let's talk about the government failure. Government failure refers to economically inefficient outcomes caused by shortcomings in the public sector. One cause of failure is voting problems. One is principal-agent problem, and that refers to conflicts that arise when tasks are delegated by one group of people, principal, to another group of people, agents. Efficient public decisions making is often impaired by the special interest effect. What is a special interest effect? Any outcome of the political process whereby a small number of people obtain a government program or policy that gives them large gains at the expense of a much greater number of persons who individually suffer small losses. Smaller groups can achieve political victories due to collective action problem. That is, larger groups are more difficult to organize and motivate than smaller groups. Earmarks are narrow, specifically designed expenditures placed within broad legislation. Rent-seeking is the appeal to government for special benefits at taxpayers' expense. So public agencies are generally less efficient than private businesses. The market system imposes a very obvious test of performance on private system. the test of profit and loss, but there is no clear-cut test like this for public agencies. Economists assert that government employees often gain political clout to block attempts to eliminate their agencies. Also, critics point out that government bureaucrats tend to justify their continued employment by looking for a new problem to solve. And inefficient regulation and intervention can happen too. Several forms of government regulation and intervention have been known to generate outcomes that are less beneficial than intended. A government agency has suffered from regulatory capture when the industry can control its government regulator. A classic example is that of pharmaceutical industry regulation. One potential solution is for the government to engage in deregulation by intentionally removing most or all of the regulations governing an industry. And finally, we talk about corruption. Corruption involves government officials misusing power for personal gain. For instance, needing to bribe a government official to get them to do their job. And government official can be in two basic forms. One, a government official must be bribed to do what he or she could be doing as part of his or her job. Two, a government official demands a bribe to do something that he or she is not legally entitled to do. And imperfect institutions, both markets and governments are imperfect, and it can be hard to decide which should provide certain goods or services. For example, debates over whether healthcare should be run by the government or private sector is one of them. And the last word, governments offer subsidies to lure businesses, but the benefits rarely outweigh the cost. For example, Amazon's second headquarters. Cities offered huge incentives to Amazon, but the returns are very disappointing. So the recent battle to win the second headquarters of Amazon was just the latest example of government spending massive amounts of taxpayer dollars to lure companies to their areas with promises of tax abatements and other incentives. In many cases, if the companies do move, the actual benefits to the communities are far less than projected. These are a classic example of government failure created by the principal agent problem that exists between the voters who must pay for the subsidies and the politicians whose main goal is staying in the office. So that's all about for this chapter. Thank you for watching this video.